All right, guys, this is a really, really long interview. By the way, if you ever want us to watch something, whether it's trailer related or anything really, you can click our Reddit link, !Reddit. We'll take a look at it, man. With that being said, though, this is an interview that Ackman did with Marty O'Donnell, who was, I want to say, like the composer, lead composer. Was it every Halo, all the Halo music? So this guy right here, lead composer, audio director too. So you oversaw voice acting. Yeah. So this was a guy who was very close to everything. He hasn't been with Bungie for a very long time, but he goes over right here, the title, The Dark History of Bungie, featuring Marty O'Donnell. We're not watching this video today to dunk on Bungie. I mainly wanted to watch this because you guys wanted us to watch this. So here we are, and we'll see if, I don't know, we'll see what he has to say. No. He didn't work on any of the Destiny music. He didn't work on any of Destiny 2's music. He did do Destiny 1's music. D2 stuff, I'm really confused, man. Like, Salvatore, I thought, had been there for forever as well. So did Salvatore take Marty's position? Did they work together, you know? Or was Salvatore not there as long as I thought? They co-created the music from the beginning. Gotcha. All right, let's watch this, guys. Buckle up, and hopefully we get some insight on some things.
Majority of senior members of Bungie who left voluntarily, that might not have been their first choice. What appears to be happening at the surface is not the full story, and there are things that go way, way back. We acted like it was our IP to control, and we made the decisions. When I saw that spirit go away, it was very depressing. The executives at Microsoft have decided that we're not going to do a PC port of Halo. And I said, yeah, that's completely unacceptable. He goes, well, Marty, it's just a business decision. So when I say we couldn't get Microsoft out of Bungie, that's what I mean. Come on, people. Can't you figure that out? I feel like my period of time with Bungie, for me, I consider that Camelot. That was the perfect time. And when you're in Camelot and it's happening, you're sort of not aware of how great it is. And I leave it up to other people to decide what sort of company Bungie ended up being, and it is today.
God damn it, dude. Ackman has some of the best thumbnails. Look at that. I watched this yesterday, definitely worth the watch.
What's up, everybody? This is the Act Man here, and today I have a very special guest with me today, here to talk about the recent drama surrounding Bungie, and maybe some old drama about Bungie. We might be uncovering some stones today to see what kind of critters and bugs and maggots lie beneath. Ladies and gentlemen, Marty O'Donnell.
Here I am. Thank you. Can I call you Kelly, or is that too
You
personal?
sure can.
I feel more comfortable doing that than like the lonely cat man or whatever you are now.
I'm taking care of a cat right now.
I shouldn't have told Marty that.
Lonely
That's
cat
good.
man, come on, that's a low blow.
It is.
Right in my feelings. Marty and I have talked on previous occasions about, you know, Bungie, Halo. I actually did an entire interview on my channel. What was that, 4 years ago?
It's got to be more than 3. I've been in Las Vegas a little over 3 years. So that was in the middle of COVID back when I was still in Seattle. So that's we're talking 4 or 5 years ago, believe it or not. So
great video.
I've gotten-
everybody loved it. I remember seeing the comments on that because I think that might have been the first or second time I talked with you, and all the comments are like, just look at Ackman's face. He's so f***ing happy right now.
See, you're not as enamored anymore. You're not intimidated by my glowing fame.
I'm immune to starstruck.
Yes,
I no
that's
longer
good.
get starstruck.
Plus, you know, the thing I like about you is you are a fun streaming content creator. You don't consider yourself a journalist. I made some fun yesterday on Twitter about journalists, game journalists especially. And I know a lot of game journalists, and a lot of them are my friends, and I've had good conversations with lots of them. But I continue to sort of get astounded at the amount of, shall I say, ignorance that the journalists seem to remain in when it comes to what happens inside of game studios. I know it's tough to get inside and find out and really dig as a journalist to find out what's really going on inside these game studios. But, you know, I've been here for a while saying, hey, you know, if you guys want to talk to me, I'll give you some details. You know, there have been certain points in my life where I can't give details.
The day the music died when Bungie fired Marty O'Donnell. I wish it hadn't happened.
But at this point, I'm sort of open to giving details, and people don't take me up on it. So either they don't take me seriously anymore, or they don't think I have anything new to add. But
well, that was my impression. Was Marty, it's been a while, man. I mean, not that you don't have fantastic information and insight into what's happening, but man, it's been a long time. And I think maybe as we go on through this video, I think maybe Bungie itself may be unrecognizable even to Marty right now. You know, a lot of what people say the OGs or have either split off, went to 343, were left on their own accord, or were let go in some way. So yeah, it could be that, or it could just be that Marty, maybe some of the shit you say is just too damn scary. Could be that.
Yeah, I'm doing the real journalistic integrity.
I'm not a journalist.
I'm not a rapper.
I don't know the first thing about journalism, but I do give, I think, a sort of layman's perspective on things, or at least someone who's like really into the game industry. So like, you know, the last time Bungie laid people off was October 2023. And I don't know if you saw on my Twitter, but I went back and I saw Pete Parsons' response, and it's almost just the exact same, like, oh man, such a difficult decision, you know? So I may not have the inside scoop like with the journalist angle like someone like Jason Schreier might have.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up Jason Schreier, because I've spoken with Jason many times, and yeah, I mean, if I still have an open call out to Jason, like anytime you want to talk to me about, you know, to confirm some details. I know he's talking to some inside Bungie employees that remain anonymous,
of course,
and there's a reason why all these people have to remain anonymous and like be off the record, and you know, it's all, you know, cloak and dagger intriguing stuff. It's amazing to me though, there are two things. Let me just say, there are two things that happen when you work at a studio. You have these two NDAs that you sign. One is non-disclosure agreement, and the other is non-disparagement agreement. Those things don't seem to matter when you are first being hired, because you're like, wow, I'm being hired, I get to work in the game industry, I get to do my dream job, sure, where do I sign? So you sign away some rights, which really don't mean much until you're let go or fired, or something happens that causes you to no longer work for that company. And then as you're leaving, as you're walking out the door, they go, remember, non-disclosure, non-disparagement, and you're like, what does that mean exactly? So yeah, think about it this way. Corporation, giant, big, huge, all the power employee. I'm just a meek employee down here. Please, sir, can I have some more? Yeah. That's just the way it goes, right?
I'm just happy to be working my dream job.
Yes. And so now
you can't ever criticize us if we treat you like shit.
Yes. We will sue you into oblivion if you violate these NDA things.
And look, that's not a Bungie thing, guys. That's literally like everywhere, man. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm just saying like it is a shitty thing, because yes, there are multiple corporations. You get picked up by them, you sign NDAs, you're excited to be there. It could be a dream job of yours, and then all of a sudden you're living in hell and it's terrible. And now you're in a situation that if you're let go, fired, or you quit, right, you can't even talk about some of those things, because whatever falls under that umbrella of NDAs.
Employees are like, well, I'm not sure I know exactly what that means. It's just easier to keep my mouth shut for the rest of my life.
Yep, pretty much.
And that's why it's so hard for people to find out what the heck's going on. So when I see people tweet and say, I can't believe this guy fired me 2 days after he showed me his cars, that's just a hypothetical.
Right.
Just saying. I'm like, oh, well, there's a person who's not that worried about, you know, being sued into oblivion, which is kind of encouraging to me to see that some people have a spine. If everybody who was laid off or fired in the entire game industry just all at the same time came out and spilled the beans, none of these corporations have enough money or firepower to sue everybody.
How many lawyers would...
The problem is, this is where the developers are in a sticky situation. You come out with condemning words for your previous employer, even if they are 1,000% true and on the money. I think the concern is that what is the likelihood of another studio picking you up? Because if Studio A is doing the same shit Studio B is doing and C is doing, and they just saw you essentially run your previous employer in the mud for good reason, right? I'm not saying these are not valid reasons. Then would that hurt your possibilities of employment in the future?
Would that take? If it's like 100 people.
It was 100 people suing me.
Which is crazy to think about.
Well, I might be exaggerating slightly, but
But it was basically their entire legal department at Bungie was coming after.
They came after me for a really long time. There's a long, convoluted story there, and it's ridiculous. And I'm willing to talk about all sorts of things. The one thing about non-disparagement is, and I'm encouraging everybody, and I have lawyer friends and lawyer enemies. Some of my best friends are lawyers. Some of my best enemies are lawyers. But the thing about non-disparagement is if you're telling the truth and you're not being overtly or overly, critical, you're telling the truth.
You got to?
It's really hard to prove disparagement. So I would encourage everybody, look, just tell your story, be unemotional, don't name call. Disparaging is one of those, terms of art in the legal profession that can be interpreted in a lot of ways. And the corporations and the executives who want to sue you into oblivion would love to interpret it super harshly and accuse you of all sorts of things. It's really hard to prove that. It costs them a lot of money. Unfortunately, to defend yourself, it costs you money too. So that's why most people just say, I'm just going to go on and get another job. And
just wipe my brain, basically. So you've seen the news about the Bungie layoffs and all of that
Bungie?
stuff.
Really?
Yeah, I know. Crazy, right?
Was that recently? Yeah.
Yeah. I know.
Yes,
the more things change, the more they stay the same. There were a few tweets I saw. One of them said, "I've been impacted by the layoffs announced this morning. It's been a privilege working with everyone at Bungie for the past almost 5 years, but it's just really bad timing because my maternity leave was supposed to start next Monday and I get laid off today." That's pretty, it's
Double kill. Dude, I fucking can't get that out of my mind.
Saturday as of recording this. Ooh, that maternity leave would have been nice in 2 days, but yeah, it's like that cliche, like he was just 1 day off from retirement.
So here's the thing, and people have rightly criticized any comments that I've made for, hey, you haven't even been at Bungie for, over a decade. And that's true. I still have a few acquaintances inside Bungie. I have a few inside knowledge things, but not that much. And I haven't been there. But I do know some of the main players who are doing things that I've seen them do for many years. So I can at least say, hey, there's a pattern here. And there are people who I find very interesting that they are no longer at Bungie, knowing that if they could have hung on for a couple more years, they probably would have made out pretty good because there was a kind of vesting plan for people who were employees of Bungie in terms of the Sony buyout. Mm-hmm. So there was a vesting plan, and in order to vest, you have to remain. And if during the vesting period, this is just a technical thing, if during the vesting period you get fired, that's when it ends. So if tomorrow was the day that vesting was going to come through for you and you get fired the day before, whoops, you don't get that money.
But Bungie gets to save some money, so it's not all bad, right?
Exactly.
They got purchased for a few $1 billion? Not quite enough, I don't think. So when you talk about vesting, are you, and more higher up guys, are you referring to Luke Smith and some of the other?
Interesting. Yeah. I would assume, I don't know for a fact,
that he probably wanted to stay there. Okay. All right. I get what you're laying down.
Yeah, I would guess so. I'm not saying Luke and Mark can't go work on something else, but they've only been a part of every major, super major expansion in Destiny for ever, I would assume they probably wanted to, I don't know. I feel like they probably didn't want payback to be canned.
Yeah, I might not be super specific on every question you answer or ask me.
Fair enough.
But I think there are things you could easily speculate about, knowing what people's roles used to be or were just until recently or whatever. The higher up you are, the more likely you are participating in some sort of stock equity related program. This is the thing that also sort of surprises me, and people on the outside constantly look at salary. And I would say salary isn't the whole picture. Ownership, stock ownership, equity in the company.
Especially if the company is doing well, right?
Yeah. Or if the company gets bought for a huge pile of money, somehow the stock in the original company now has to be purchased by the new company. So Sony actually had to buy a bunch of stock, and there was probably some sort of deal on that, obviously.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It seems like there's a pattern of certain senior members at Bungie leaving under, mysterious circumstances. And it seems there are two that remain, always two that remain. You know the old Sith creed, right?
No.
Always two there are. A master and an apprentice.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Am I crazy, or is that like a real pattern that I'm noticing?
You know, what's interesting to me, and if you want to, we can get into some of the details, but this goes back a long time. Hey, by the way, did anybody celebrate the fact that July was the 25th anniversary of the Steve Jobs Macworld 99 unveiling of Halo to the world with Jason Jones and the monks and the music and all that? Does anybody remember that was 25 years ago?
That's
just
crazy.
Now. The story of Bungie doesn't start there. It starts back in, 92, 93 with Alex and Jason. And so there are many, eras of Bungie. And I was a big part of maybe a couple of the eras, but, the modern Bungie, I definitely am not part of.
I would almost argue, Marty, that you being fired, is that the correct term? Or like,
oh, yeah, no, I was outright fired, yes.
When you got fired, it marked the end of an era, or at least the end of a perception I think we all had about Bungie. The Destiny games were still fun to an extent, but I think there was very clearly something that radically changed right after that.
Well, it's interesting. When I was on the verge of being fired and knew that firing was coming up, and I'd been warned about being fired, and there was almost an entire year. This is the other thing people don't remember. I mean, 25 years is a long time, and I had worked with Bungie for 3 years prior to that. I think I met the guys in 96, 97, something like that, and we shipped our first game in 97. So even by the time Macworld came out, I had been with.
Damn, I didn't realize Marty had been there that long. Jesus, since 96. Good God. He got let go in 2014, though.
Those guys, working with those guys for a while. And then I became an employee officially in 2000. So when you think about how much can happen in 2 weeks, we're not going to get into politics, I promise. But I mean, just look at how much the political landscape has changed in like the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, a lot
People
can change in a quick amount of time.
Yeah, how much can change over time. And if things can change that much in just a matter of weeks, the fact that we're talking about something that happened 25 years ago, think about how much can happen in a 25-year span. Just amazing amounts of stuff can happen. So
that's just 5/6 of my life. 5/6 of my life.
There you go. You're just a kid.
Yeah, so I'm 30 now. I'm officially old.
30. Did you really hit 30?
Yeah.
Oh.
I know. I look like
I'm older and older. No, you're looking good. You're looking good.
Thank you. You too, by the way. The hair and beard combo is...
Well, anyway, my point is that a lot has happened, and there are patterns you can see, but like what appears to be happening at the surface is not the full story, and there are things that go way, way back. So when you talk about, wow, who has been there the whole time, who has not left?
Yeah.
That is an interesting story.
That's an interesting thing to, I think I remember Jason was kind of away from the public for a long time, and there was like the first interview he gave in 6-7 years or something. Which he's kind of always been a bit more reclusive, right?
Well, Jason has evolved over time. There's no doubt about that. Parts of him have always been the same. He's never really liked the limelight, but he was sort of the face of Bungie back in the day. He didn't shy away from being videotaped by...
You guys had to force him into that, I bet.
No. He was happy to do his little mugging for the camera back when Doug Zartman was shooting or Tuncer Denise was shooting. So if you look back in the Marathon days and the Myth days, Jason was out there a lot. I mean, I did a video with him in my studio working on Myth of Fallen Lords, and he loved it. And he was out there doing his thing, and he didn't do a lot of interviews because nobody was doing a lot of interviews. That was not necessarily a big thing back then. But Jason didn't mind being on camera and being out there and being part of the marketing, so to speak. But it was a much different time period, right? It was like the stakes were not as high as they ended up being. The budgets of these games were much lower, and it was a more seat of the pants operation. So Alex and Jason were a fun combo, but Jason didn't shy away from being interviewed. That happened later. I think when success came into Bungie, more and more success, more and more spotlight, Jason sort of started retreating, and that became his persona.
I remember something very specific you told me in Las Vegas when I met you during TwitchCon. I believe you said Jason wanted to have fuck you money. I believe that's the way it was put.
Maybe I said, did I say F you money, maybe?
Yes. I appreciate you not cursing in front of my young Christian audience. Thank you.
Yeah, Jason was, he didn't have a problem talking about the fact that he wanted to be able to, at some point, get compensated for the huge influence that he had on the gaming industry, which he did. He has been compensated, trust me.
Yeah.
I know this for sure.
Deservedly so?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Marathon was a moment in gaming history. Myth was a moment in gaming history. Halo was a huge, huge moment. And all of us who worked with Jason and for Jason were attracted by the games Jason made, or just attracted by the way he thought about things, the way he designed games. None of us would take any of that away from Jason. His talent is huge.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, and Destiny, too, also.
Destiny was pretty monumental. I mean, you could debate on the quality.
It has a 10-year run.
Yeah.
Whatever there was, 1,200 people working, how many people, just so many things about Destiny, so many things about Halo, and it goes right back to Jason Jones, without a doubt. Now, Jason didn't do it by himself. Certainly, I think the combination of Jason Jones and Alex Seropian was a magic combination. I don't think either one of them alone could have done what the two of them did together. So I think that's a very interesting combo that you have to look at both of them as the founders of the original Bungie software.
The reason I bring up Jason Jones is because he's pretty much the only person left I can think of from the old Vidocs that, like, in my head, I really associate Bungie with. And I find it interesting because, again, you and I talked about certain things in Vegas, and I'm curious to know how many of the more senior members of Bungie left willingly or had to make it appear that they left willingly.
That's a great question, and I might have to be slightly careful in how I answer this, but my recollection is the majority of senior members of Bungie who left voluntarily, that might not have been their first choice.
Gotcha.
Now, remember, I didn't leave voluntarily. I was fired, so it's obviously wasn't my first choice. So
right.
I was the one who said, yeah, no, I'm not taking the separation deal. I don't like it. I don't believe in it. I think it's crap. So if you want me gone, you're going to have to fire me.
So if people were to go back, they might see a pattern of people, and then they get to Stonewall Johnson, a.k.a. Marty O'Donnell, who puts his foot down and says, no, you're going to have to fire me. And it's just interesting that
Stonewall Johnson.
This whole big lawsuit happened between you guys, and a lot of other people just seem to leave without much fuss.
Yeah, people can assume all sorts of things about why that was, but I was determined that I wasn't going to fall for what I consider to be the same trap that others had fallen into. And what I started seeing is this because of the fact that I have founder stock in the new Bungie Inc.? And is my share of Bungie more than they want to credit me for? And if I stay another few weeks, is my stock going to vest? Is this the reason I'm going? Or is it because I'm such a horrible person and I deserve to be fired? And hey, there's two ways of looking at it.
Right.
So once they fired me with just a few weeks to go before my stock vested, my founder's stock.
Just a few weeks, huh? Interesting.
Yeah. And by the way, I had already, the majority of what I was going to do on Destiny 1 was done.
And just to be clear to people, you would have stuck with Bungie, like not just because your stock vested, but because you did enjoy what you're doing and you just enjoyed working on Destiny and the music.
Yeah, well, I was audio director, so
Fellas, why are we taking such shitty deals? Why not just have stocks vest literally, like, instead of like over a 2-3 year period, maybe doing it annually? Why not just have stocks vest literally every month? Just split it up in percentages. You know what I mean? Or every 6 weeks or something. I don't know. Like, that's how the system set up. I thought it was a company choice. You could set it up. You could set up vesting conditions whatever way you wanted. Whether you wanted to be done quarterly, biannually, you could set it up whatever way you want. Why take the risk of doing, if it's such a big vesting, why do the annual vesting or even longer than that? Because lots of people would hop around in the corporate world. Think of the turnover rate of people working for like a year, then jumping ship if vesting was too short. Of course, I'm a sub here. I want my eggplants vested.
I loved casting actors. I loved working with the writers on the scripts. I loved, directing actors in the studio. I loved working with musicians and other composers. Heck, I had just spent 2 years working with Paul McCartney on Music of the Spheres. So, and plus I was on the board of directors at Bungie, and I was one of the senior executives, and I had founder stock. So the idea that I was just sort of like, well, he's just this guy over to the side that writes music for us every once in a while, and then he start mouthing off, so we're going to fire him. That's just not the way I looked at it. And I don't think anybody clearly shows.
Yeah, I don't think any reasonable person saw it that way. We do always have to be careful when we talk about these things. But just to be clear, what were the previous leadership people?
Leadership people.
What were some of the
people?
What were some of the previous leadership at Bungie who didn't leave as their first choice? What were they in charge of?
Well, let's see. The way I remember it, I was the fifth of 5. All these roles were creative. So there was one of the first people to leave was a person who had been a lead designer for Halo 1, Halo 2, and Halo 3, and worked hard on design for Destiny, one-on-one with Jason Jones. So that was a pretty major person in my mind, a creative person to go.
Mm-hmm.
And soon after that, 2 of the people that went were the 2 people who directed and created ODST, who had been previously main writer and main designer, one of the lead designers for Halo 1, 2, 3, ODST. See, that's 3. So the 4th person that I didn't like to see him go was somebody who had been art director for Bungie for Halo 1, 2, and 3, and then was project lead on Halo Reach.
Wow, so just pivotal, hugely important people at Bungie.
Right. And I was on the board during that time, and I was just like, wait a minute, what's going on? Now, remember, it took years for this to happen.
It wasn't just like a set of dominoes falling over.
No, it was like sort of at the beginning of 2011 into 2013. So over like a 2-3 year period, these things were happening. And I would ask questions like, well, wait a minute, what's going on? Why are we doing this? And it would be like, well, they signed a non-disclosure agreement and a confidentiality agreement. And this is on me. As a board member, I should have insisted, no, you can't have these people sign confidentiality agreements and not have a board member see it. I should have insisted on seeing what this was.
Yeah.
Some of these people I took out
Okay, he was an actual board member. He was one of the original 7.
to lunch, like, hey, it's Marty, what was going on? Yeah, let's get lunch. And then they would tell me their story. So I certainly don't want to get any of these people in trouble because maybe they broke their confidentiality agreement by talking to me. But what I saw was this is not good. This is a pattern of the people in leadership who were not creatives. They came with a pedigree from Microsoft. They were not the original Bungie team. So when I say we couldn't get Microsoft out of Bungie, that's what I mean. Come on, people. Can't you figure that out?
Yep. I was just about to bring up the tweet Yep.
Yes.
So hold on. Who the fuck fired Marty? What does the board take a vote? Like, how does that work? If you're a founder, you got founder stock, you are one of the 7 on the board. The board then will take a vote to have you booted? I'm curious to know where any of these previous folks. Okay, let's just continue.
Microsoft never left Bungie.
No, they didn't.
They never left.
And that's because I guess I have an excuse for why that happened. In hindsight, I think it was a huge mistake to allow essentially the training that some people had gotten from Microsoft to actually stay inside of Bungie leadership. And that's where I see some of the problems happening is because now, trust me, there are other people who were in creative leadership, who were original Bungie members, who went along with what I would consider to be bad business decisions. I mean, getting rid of some of these creatives, in my opinion, was bad business decisions. And also just sort of like, that seems kind of mean. It doesn't seem right.
Especially because none of you guys wanted to leave at that point, correct?
I could say this for myself. I saw the writing on the wall more than a year before I was fired. And it got increasingly frustrating to stay inside and work in the system of Bungie with the way decisions were being made by leadership. So I was, to a certain extent, kind of looking forward to not being there anymore because I couldn't make them do what I thought was right. So I had one vote out of whatever it was. I think there were 7 of us on the board. 7. So yeah, it was 1 against 6 for a long time. And I could see that we were parting ways. You know, I felt this was important. The rest of the board felt something else was important. So I wasn't necessarily a happy camper inside Bungie for a while.
Yeah.
So in the sense that, like, it kind of was a relief. And I'm not going to speak for any of the other 4 guys that I've been talking about, but I have a feeling some of them probably felt the same way. It's time to move on, and that's why they took the deal. So when I say it wasn't their first choice, I think there's more to it than just a binary choice. It's sort of like, I would have chosen to stay if I could have had influence to see Bungie go in a better direction, in my opinion, a better direction, right? I mean,
like maybe in your position, if you hadn't seen previous creative leads kind of slowly but surely brought to the guillotine, metaphorically speaking, like if you hadn't seen that, if all those guys maybe were still there if they wanted to be, probably would have felt different.
Yes, I don't think I would have been the first one out.
Yeah.
I was the 5th one out, which is to a certain extent kind of, you know, I wish in hindsight that I had had more of a spine. Believe it or not, when the very first guy went out, I was incensed, but I didn't sacrifice myself for his sake.
Yeah.
I remember saying, wait, did we just get rid of the best designer we've ever had? And the guy who was at that moment, we had a producer position who was in charge of the designers inside Bungie. And I talked to him. I'm like, wait, did we just get rid of the very best designer we've ever had? And he goes, yeah, we did. And I'm like, okay, how does that make sense? Like, our total design power, you know, went from here down to here, and with no plan on fixing the deficit. And he's like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, like I said, we just have to be careful about how much detail we reveal, because again, Marty has immunity. I don't have immunity necessarily. And I might be a little concerned based on something you told me, right? Which was that when you were going through certain things with Bungie, our previous interview was actually used as evidence against you.
Yes, it was.
Wow. I helped work to incriminate you. Let's go. Let
me just say, you probably cost me money. That's
but I paid you an exposure, and that's
yes, the exposure was wonderful. Yeah, you know, I mean, the thing that they came after me with, remember that after I was fired in 2013, I didn't sue for wrongful termination, which is a mistake most people make. I completely said, fine, Bungie, you have every right to fire me. You just don't have the right to take the stock that I earned, especially as a founder of Bungie Inc. Now, that Bungie Inc. started basically 2007. July 7th, 2007, Bungie got independent of Microsoft. I went in, believe it or not, it was me. I went into the bank. I went to a lawyer friend. I got us set up as an LLC. I went and started a bank account. I had to get money. I think I got $100 from each one of the 7 guys that started the new company. And that eventually got rolled over
7.
7. Always 7.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I don't think is a Bungie. I don't think that's a Bungie number anymore. I don't think
they still do 7s. I mean, even Kavostov is literally designed around 7, but yeah.
Really care anymore. So
I don't know if it's 7 board members. I just mean like 7 is a number that Bungie still plays on.
I was the one who started the new company with the other 6 guys. But by the time we got to Bungie Inc., which was around end of reach time period, that was going to be the new corporation going forward. So basically 2011, January 1st, 2011 is you can sort of see that's the beginning of Bungie Incorporated. Just Bungie.
What a throwback.
That's what it was called, Bungie Inc. Up until then, it was Bungie Software Inc., which then disappeared. People forget Bungie Software Incorporated from Chicago disappeared. It was completely, entirely consumed.
No, you guys were born and raised in Washington. Right?
So we, the original Bungie crew moved out to Seattle. We were 100% blue badge Microsoft employees for 7 years, from 2000 to 2007. And we worked our way out of that, starting, believe it or not, halfway through Halo 2. So in 2002, 2003, that's when we started negotiating with Microsoft to get ourselves free and independent. So that took 4 years, at least. So by 2007, we're independent again, new company. Eventually that becomes Bungie Inc. Figure that that's another 4 years after we got ourselves truly independent. Bungie Inc., the company we know of as today, started in 2011.
And then they sold on with Activision Blizzard, right?
No, we had already signed a deal with Activision Blizzard before that. We were working on that deal while we were finishing Reach. And by the way, the negotiations with Microsoft to get ourselves free took a couple years at least. We were negotiating that at least a couple years before Halo 3 came out. So when Halo 3 came out, which was fall of 2007, we were already fully independent. So people just forget how long these things take and who were the players.
Yeah,
so
who were the players involved?
Absolutely one of the players and people in the studio. Some of them looked to me to make a good deal. And some of them were like, Marty, why are you doing this? Why are we doing this? We should stay at Microsoft. And I'm like, no, we shouldn't. We should be independent. We should own our own IP. We should never let a big corporation own the intellectual property that we're creating. As creators, we should own our intellectual property. And that was my point from the beginning, and which we did. So when we made the deal with Activision,
it was just for publishing.
It was just publishing. We owned the IP. And by the way, that's essentially, in my mind, the reason I was fired. Because Activision, in my opinion, was starting to try to push us around as though they owned the IP. And I was against that. Just that simple. Now, get somebody else in here if you want. You could get Harold Ryan in. You could get Jason Jones in. You could get Pete Parsons in. And they will tell you their side of the story.
Oh, yeah.
They will tell you Marty's a jerk. And Marty was disruptive. And Marty wasn't a team player. Let them tell you everything. I'm telling you my side of the way I remember it.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is correct.
I would gladly have any of those guys on if they wanted to come on and dispute any of Marty's claims. So there's still a few things I wanted to ask you about to just kind of get like a better understanding of what has really happened at Bungie. I mean, you've brought up Pete Parsons. He seems like a pretty nice guy, living the life. He's got all these fancy cars. I mean, what's not to like about him? He had to make a difficult decision, Marty. It was so hard for him.
It was hard. It was very difficult. And for the record, Pete drove me around in his muscle car. I think it was a Pontiac GTO from like 1966 or something. It was great. A convertible GTO, souped up. It was great. This is probably, at least 15 years ago. At least. So Pete was always somebody who enjoyed his cars. So,
and that's totally fine, by the way. Like, I just want to make it clear to people, like, if you're providing a product that's valuable and you sell it like a good businessman and you make money, yeah, sure, go ahead, spend $2.3 million on cars or whatever. I think the issue people have is
it's not like he's burning his money like I did on my congressional race. He actually
But you did that for fun. And,
I did. It was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pete, he could be buying collectible. He could be buying real estate. He could be buying coins, right? I mean, he could be buying action figures like behind you. He likes to collect stuff, right? His passion is collecting cars. It's his money, and he has every right to buy what he wants to buy. So I don't have a problem with Pete buying cars, but I do disagree with when people talk about Pete Parsons as though he's been an executive at Bungie for the last 20 years. That's just not true. And I would like people to understand who Pete Parsons is, where he came from, what his pedigree is, and why this isn't necessarily a huge shock to me that what's happening at Bungie is happening. The first time I met Pete was during the Halo 1 days. Pete was a Microsoft employee. I think he might have been in the executive level. So while we were working on Halo 1, we would run into Pete every once in a while because he was part of the marketing team for Microsoft. And he was a big fan of what we were doing. He was a big fan of what was happening with Halo.
Clearly he saw the potential in it.
Yeah, I mean, and to the extent that Xbox marketing emphasized Halo was certainly a partnership between us and Pete Parsons and Ed Fries, for example. Ed Fries, who was at the time was head of Microsoft Game Studios. So a couple of things happened within a year after shipping Halo 1. So now we're talking 2002. Alex Seropian left. So a full year after we shipped Halo 1, Alex left. somewhere around that same time period, I might be within 6 months, I don't remember, Ed Fries left Microsoft Game Studios. So there we are, the guy who was sort of our protector inside Microsoft, Ed Fries, was gone. And then when Alex was hired by Microsoft, along with everybody else inside of Bungie, which no longer existed, we became a business unit, the Bungie business unit, right? Inside Microsoft. Now, what we insisted on is hey, you guys got to let us act like we're still Bungie. So our fans, we think that we're still Bungie. We're all together. You guys can't come in. We're going to have our own corner of the building. We're going to be separate from the rest of Microsoft. We're not doing any of that Microsoft crap. We're not doing any of those reports the way you do it. We're doing our own thing. And they let us do that, especially Ed Fries thought it was great. So we were able to ostensibly, to the outside world, it still seemed like Bungie was the little game studio that could, and we made Halo. Now, of course, we couldn't have done that without the support of the behemoth, Microsoft. But remember, we were going to be a launch title, which means we were making something for a product that didn't exist. We were making something for a platform that had no track record. We weren't making a PC game at that point. We had changed the direction from making a PC game that we hoped would sell a million units, and there were millions and millions of PCs out there, right? So when you have a platform that you're making something for, like let's say the PlayStation 2 at the time, which we could have done, we knew that there were X number of PlayStation 2s out in the gaming sphere that hopefully will get a certain number shipped for that. When you're a launch title, it's a giant crapshoot. So you can't do it because you're depending on a certain number of units to be sold. So Microsoft had to completely be 100% support of us. We still wanted to the outside world make people think that we were an independent studio, and we acted like an independent studio. And we really did. Our attitude, you go back and look at some of those early videos, we would make fun of Microsoft, we would pretend like they were the evil empire and all that stuff, but we were 100% dependent on them funding us.
Right.
So at the time, we had a pretty good relationship with them, especially when Ed Fries was there, because he kind of understood.
What a unique relationship, right? You called them the evil empire, yet you're completely dependent on them. I find it interesting. And now Alex left in 2002, and he went to go work for Microsoft. What is Alex doing now?
The individual personalities involved, and he really respected creativity, and he allowed it to happen. So all through Halo 1, Pete was not very present at all. He came in from the Microsoft side. A year after Halo 1 had shipped, that's when we lost Alex. That's about when Ed Fries was gone. So now we had to figure out who's going to run the studio. Now, Alex was officially the only person at Bungie who wasn't just a Microsoft employee. He had been hired in as a Microsoft executive.
Which is a good connection to have.
Yeah. So we loved the fact that Alex was sort of our shield against certain things. Alex got very frustrated. You should have Alex on your show. Alex might actually do your show.
Sure.
But I remember him talking to me and just saying, Marty, this is so hard because I used to be the man, meaning that he was the guy in charge of Bungie. And he says, now I'm sort of an in-between guy. I'm having to sell to my, superiors above me and then sell down to the people within Bungie. I'm in between. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't sound like the kind of place you want to stay very long. I get it, Alex. You need to be out doing your own thing. And I totally understood that. I felt the same way about me. I thought that I was going to be gone.
You needed to sprout your wings and fly away.
Yeah, which, by the way, probably would have been not a dumb thing for me to have done in 2002. I could have easily just said, this was a blast. I'm not really cut out to be an employee of Microsoft, but I sure enjoyed working on Halo, the first Halo with all you guys, and now I'm going to go back to Chicago and do my own thing.
An alternate reality that we don't want to see.
There's so many alternate realities.
Yeah. So is the main gist of what you're getting at is that you guys sort of lost like you said, the shield between you and the more corporate side of like video game development, the interference, the sort of like, hey, do this, make it faster, make it cheaper, all that sort of thing. And then somebody else came in who was not as good of a shield.
Well, let me just say this. We interviewed many people to be the studio manager. Some people were outside of Microsoft. I can't remember exactly what the discussions were, but I can remember the gist. Pete came in And to some of us, we were sort of like, yeah, Pete's a marketing guy from Microsoft. Why would we want him to be the studio manager? Pete sold us very well on his lifelong desire to be a studio head of a bunch of creative people. And like he felt like he could just handle all the business problems. And especially he knew Microsoft, so he could be that guy between Microsoft and us. So there were some people on the team that were, looking askance. Like, do we really believe this is going to happen? And by the way, if you ever get Alex Soropian on your show, you should ask him straight up. Just say, what did you think of Bungie's decision back in 2002 after you left to have Pete Parsons be the studio manager? See if he'll answer.
Okay. Can I point out something real quick? Is that
Sure.
I found it interesting that both Bungie and Microsoft announced layoffs shortly after releasing games with, Hi-Fi Rush, winning all these awards and stuff. Studio closed down. And then Final Shape releases, over 1 million pre-orders, just pre-orders, all these layoffs. So when you talk about like Microsoft, I feel like that's kind of a consistent strategy of like releasing something, okay, cutting the fluff. Or
Well, let's just talk about Microsoft for a second, because a lot of people act like, gosh, Microsoft hasn't been an influence on Bungie for over a decade. Why is that even a thing?
Yeah.
Well, let's just think about this for a second. Number one, it takes a long time sometimes for things to pan out the way they do. But when I was at Microsoft, I knew all the people. There was Robbie Bach and Shane Kim and Ed Fries, of course, Peter, Tattoo Peter, what's his name? Halo 2 Tattoo. Oh, come on. The Tattoo. Halo 2 will launch November 4th. Peter Moore.
Peter Moore. Okay,
Yes.
yeah, I remember that name.
Yeah, so I worked directly with Peter Moore. Of course, Phil Spencer. Phil Spencer was there the whole time. Almost the whole time. There was a point, Phil Spencer strategically, this is my opinion, but he strategically went to England for a couple of years, right during the period of time where Bungie was negotiating its independence from Microsoft. I might be wrong. You should get Phil Spencer on your show. Ask Phil about...
I might have said some mean things on one of my Xbox videos. I would love to have him on.
Yes. Phil might have purposely decided to stay out of the blast radius of Bungie leaving Microsoft. Or maybe not. I don't know. But I've had a long relationship with Phil Spencer, but I know how these people think. Don Matrick was a huge disappointment to me, but I wasn't that sad because by the time Don Matrick came in, Bungie had already gotten its independence. One of the negotiators, by the way, one of those guys was a guy named Don McGowan, who worked for Microsoft as a lawyer. Fast forward a few years, and it's Don McGowan as chief legal counsel for Bungie.
Oh.
How interesting. So,
how do you know that?
Well, I guess he probably showed up on some documents that were served to me. Yeah. These are details that I think people, especially journalists, like if they dug a little bit, they could see these.
You could see the
connections.
writing on the wall, right? You know that meme from Always Sunny where it's Charlie looking at the board and he's like,
Yeah.
and he's connected all the dots.
Yes,
he's not actually crazy.
The way people think about corporate shipping of games and managing studios, there is a pattern that comes from a big corporation like Microsoft. When people say you should blame Bungie, well, I do blame Bungie. But it's just, to me, it's because the people who were at the top level of Bungie were at one point at the top level of Microsoft. And it's like, that's where they got trained. That's where they decided, this is the way you handle people. This is the way you handle creatives. This is the way you handle intellectual property. This is how you ship stuff. This is just the way they do it. So
this is how you sell products.
Very little.
It's almost antithetical to what Bungie fought against when they were trying to stay in.
Are you guys understanding what they're talking about? A lot of the positions that old founders and old people that were working with Bungie in the 90s got filled by people who were originally with Microsoft. Those people were essentially bumping into Bungie on a day-to-day basis because they were working on the Halo series. And then they eventually embedded themselves in one way or another into leadership roles within Bungie. And so then that culture carried over. This is based on, listen, I want to mention this. I'm not saying Marty doesn't know what he's talking about. This is based on what Marty is saying, but he has been there since 1996, okay.
Independent and feel like they were still independent, right?
That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Actually, there was a point in time, several moments where I was on the board and I said, We acted like we owned our IP when we didn't under Microsoft. And now that we're working with Activision, we act like they own the IP. It just cracked me up. We acquiesced, we caved to things that Activision wanted us to do that I didn't think we should have, because we were acting like they owned the IP and they had control. But when we were inside Microsoft, we still had this amazingly ridiculous independent spirit, and we fought against Microsoft all the time. We acted like it was our IP to control, and we made the decisions. When I saw that spirit go away, it was very depressing for me personally. And it was at the same time I was seeing some of my compatriots also go, my brothers in arms, so to speak.
Yep, your brothers in arms. Cue music track.
Do it.
Yeah, it is enlightening because I don't think many people thought about how Bungie's time under Microsoft really affected them long term. They kind of just saw, oh, okay, they're out, they're free. Now they can really be creative and free, and they've cast off the shackles and they can do whatever they want, and nobody's telling them what to do.
Yeah, that was my vision, but unfortunately, the money was too big. If there's any lesson I've learned is when the money's too big, people change their behavior, and
they change their values. It's just not something
I do. Yeah, whether those values were ever exactly the same as mine or not, as like that's for somebody else to figure out. Let's go back to Pete for a second. Pete came in a year after we started Halo 2, and then about a year after we shipped Halo 2, he was gone.
What is the point in this video? Well, the title says The Dark History of Bungie featuring Marty O'Donnell. So I think it's just Marty. He's going over his time at Bungie, his insight, being in a board position.
Actually did on Halo 2 was he took over with another guy named Michel Bastien. The two of them took over the producer role for Halo 2 for especially the last year of Halo 2, which was, everybody knows, Halo 2 crunch was horrible.
Oh, yeah.
And I still remember I had a few one-on-ones with Pete during that period. I was very much like, hey, what's going on with Halo 1's PC port? If you remember, Gearbox was going to be working on that.
Yeah.
Pete came to me one day and said, yeah, the executives at Microsoft have decided that we're not going to do a PC version or a Mac version. And I said, yeah, that's completely unacceptable. He goes, well, Marty, it's just a business decision. I heard him say, it's just a business decision. And I said, yeah, that's not going to cut it for me, Pete, because we made a promise to the fans. Ed Fries and Alex Soropian went up on stage at a Mac World, another Mac World, look it up, and promised to the Mac fans and the PC fans in the audience, don't worry, Halo will be released on PC and Mac. And I said, we promised. And he goes, well, yeah, but it's just a business decision. So that told me a lot right there. A little, red flag went up in my mind.
A little character-defining moment.
So I didn't actually say I quit if you do this, but I made it very plain and obvious that I would not be able to exist in a situation where somebody made a business decision that ended up making me be part of a lie, that we had lied to the fans.
Massive respect.
Thank you, but I mean, this is my side of the story. Whether that had any influence or not, I have no idea, but I do know we did end up shipping for the PC and Mac.
I mean, I'm inclined to believe your side of the story, given that you are no longer at the company and the people at the company are still what the actions they're doing kind of lines up with, maybe that's just what he said when he, laid off those 220 people. It's just a business decision.
Well, one thing I could see is that part of Microsoft's training to their executives was that you should be able to accept that way of thinking. So all those people that I'm saying are Microsoft executives, other than Ed Fries, I gotta say, I think Ed is still salt of the earth guy to me, and I feel like his values and my values align in many, many ways. That's just, maybe it's rose-colored glasses. I've stayed friends with him, so I don't believe he would probably have said that kind of thing to me. So that was one thing we did. We shipped Halo for PC and Mac, but that, we had given it all over to Gearbox to do a really good job on it. Yeah, so we were working our butts off to finish Halo 2. I still remember at the end, Pete coming in with Michel Bastien, who's another guy you should interview. Michel is a big deal now at Microsoft. He's running different game studios. He's great, but he was very young at the time. But they came in and sat down with me and said, we got to go over the finishing schedule. Like, here's your dates. Here's when you got to be finished. And I said, okay, tell me why you think this. And I signed off on all these dates. And I said, great, signed off. I said, now I'm going to tell you how how it's actually going to go. We're going to be pushing. This date is going to get missed. This date is going to get missed. I'm going to be still doing this, and this at this date. And then I'm going to be talking to Jason Jones, and Jason and I are going to be frantically cramming in as much as we possibly can at the last minute. And I'm going to get Harold Ryan, who was at that point in time, he was the test manager. And test is always the final say-so on everything. There's a term for like a release candidate. So here's your first release candidate, then you test it, then you do it again, and there's a second release candidate. And so I just told him, I said, here's where the date is actually going to be. It's going to be right there. And they just looked at me like, well, but we're the producers. And I'm like, yeah, sorry. I don't mean to be a jerk, but like, I'm just telling you how it's actually going to go. So until producers understand that that's what happens in the trenches, they're not that useful.
Yeah, well, that's a good way to put it, trenches, because, you know, it's like a general commanding troops, but he's never been in a battle himself. You know, it doesn't really work out well for the troops in the trenches, does it, most times?
A lot of times it doesn't, no. When we started working on Halo 3, so now we're talking at the beginning of 2005-ish, Pete Parsons is still an executive from Microsoft called Bungie studio manager. He was the Microsoft executive who was running the Bungie business unit. We had started negotiations during Halo 2. Like I said, during Halo 2, 2002 through 2003, we were negotiating to get out of Microsoft. Because one of the things that had happened was Halo 1 was pretty successful. If you look it up, I think you can see.
Yeah. I remember hearing about it.
And there was a point where us Bungie employee or Microsoft employees who were part of the Bungie business unit, we got a little envelope from Microsoft, but it was sort of like 2 free Starbucks or something.
Oh wow! Oh, like a little gift card.
Yeah. Yeah. And there might have been a check in there, but I don't remember what it was for. So, and I might be exaggerating. I'm old, so my memory is not spectacular.
Right.
But what I remember was a general disappointment in the, sort of sharing of profits. Well, it turns out, of course, that there is no such thing as profit sharing based on, merit or your performance over a certain product inside Microsoft. As a matter of fact, I remember Robbie Box saying to me in a meeting, Marty, we don't give profit sharing to people who do Microsoft Word or Office or Excel or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, no, we get that. Actually, there were 7 of us in the office at that point.
7.
Yeah, 7 again. The 7 people who were saying, I think we should be getting something better from Microsoft, at least for the next one, Halo 2. And then he goes, Marty, you got to understand, Microsoft does not negotiate with its employees. Robbie, that makes total sense. I get it. That makes total sense to me. And then the guys started to get up. We were all going to leave the office because it was over. Like he said, we don't negotiate with our employees. And as we were reaching the door to leave, he goes, wait, guys, come back. Come on, let's talk. So I sat down again and I thought to myself, maybe Microsoft does negotiate with its employees.
He called you back, didn't he?
Yep, he did. So we negotiated a deal. We negotiated probably the only product-related profit-sharing plan maybe that Microsoft has ever done. I don't know. It's possible. So our profit-sharing plan was for Halo 2, and that caused us to stay instead of leaving. We were going to leave and start our own studio. We called it the pirate plan. We were going to go pirate. We were basically like, yep, we get it. Halo is your property. It's not ours. So we're going to leave. We're going to start our own business. And all the work we've done so far is yours. You do it. It's fine. See you later.
So that was them taking care of the golden goose when they did that profit sharing deal, because they kept all you guys and they got 4 more games out of you.
Well, what happened was they reneged. What we thought the plan was for Halo 2, they kind of changed it subtly.
They altered the deal.
Minute.
Pray they don't alter it further.
So we were like, okay, Halo 2 shipped. We got something from it. We did not get what we were expecting and what we had all thought we'd agreed on. Like, I realized, it's just business. Remember, I think I had heard that someplace earlier. But anyway,
it's just
it
good
turned out
business.
it turned out to be that good business for them was not necessarily doing what we thought they were going to do for the team. So then we said, okay, well, that's it. We are done now.
Yeah.
We're not making anything after Halo 2.
Wow, so that was like the real starting point. Yeah.
That was like, okay, so you aren't going to be good to your word. We are going to leave. and we're going to start our own company, and we're going to do what we want to do. Good luck with Halo.
Wow.
So that meant that there was almost another year of negotiation, at which point now, one of the people negotiating on our behalf was Pete Parsons, negotiating for us to the powers that be inside of Microsoft. And during the course of those negotiations, there was a moment where Jason Jones quit and Marcus Lato quit. And that was going to be it. That was, without Jason and Marcus, we didn't think we'd be able to do anything.
Damn.
So here's the other thing that happened during that period. Pete Parsons also threatened to quit. He's like, if Microsoft doesn't make good on what they are telling us they're going to do for Halo 3, I'm quitting. And we're like, okay, way to go, Pete. Yeah, he's going to quit. And then all of a sudden, Jason quits and Marcus quits, and Pete had threatened to quit. So we're sitting in this room, the 7 of us, Pete, Marcus, Jason, and like 4 others. I said, hey, you know what? Who here hasn't quit or threatened to quit? And like 4 of us raised our hand, or 5 of us, whatever it was. And I said, okay, well, I only want to talk to the people who haven't quit. So, that was kind of a shock. I remember Charlie saying, Marty, you're always threatening to quit. And I said, yeah, Charlie, you're right, but I haven't.
Yeah.
These guys actually did. So I don't want to talk to them anymore. I said, we need to talk to the people who are still officially not quitters and are still officially Microsoft employees. So those guys left, and we started talking. And I said, look, we got to get these guys to not quit. I said, I can't believe that those guys quit right at the moment when we had the upper hand. We had a royal flush, and we folded. That's the way I looked at it. So it's like, how do you fold with the nuts? Well, I don't know. So I said, okay, this could be it, but like we have 2 choices. We either hang here and go forward and all for one for all, or we just all sort of go our separate way. I said, let's talk to each one of these guys. Let's bring Marcus back in. Brought Marcus in, and I said, okay, before we start, I just want to ask Marcus, is there anything that we can do for you so that you will stay with us? And Marcus is like, wow, nobody's asked me that before. Now, of course, this is my memory. You can talk to anybody else.
Right.
And they'll say, Marty's full of it. This is not what happened. So Marcus said, well, I need this, and this, and we should be doing that. And I'm like, yeah, well, I think we could do that. What do you guys think? We're all like, yeah, we think that. I said, okay, well, Marcus, if you can do all that, will you stay? He goes, yes. I said, okay, well, now we're unified. Can we all agree if we're unified on the 6 of us here, or the 7 of us, who else do we need back? And of course, the obvious answer was we need Jason Jones back. So I said, okay, well, let's bring in Jason. Asked Jason the same question. He had his answers. We said, we can do that. Will you stay with us? He goes, yes. I'm like, okay, here we are. We're unified as a team. I said, okay, so now Pete is the only one left. Pete has threatened to quit. He told us he was going to quit. That will be a big message to Microsoft that shows that we are serious. We are going to be independent. And I said, do you want to bring Pete in and ask him what he needs to stay with us? And there was not a unanimous decision. There were people inside that room that were like, Pete has played both sides of the fence. That's the way it felt. He was an executive. He was not really part of Bungie. He was a Microsoft executive.
An opportunist?
I was not the one to say that, but like as the discussion went around, we were not unified in asking Pete to stay with us in this next stage.
And yet somehow he did. Interesting.
No, he didn't.
Oh, he didn't?
No. We went up. I think Michelle and Harold went up and told Pete, we appreciate that you're going to fall on your sword, and this will be a huge message to Microsoft, so please go quit. And Microsoft will have to come to us and ask us to finish Halo 3, which, by the way, was far from being finished. I think we were only about maybe a year into Halo 3. So we had a going away party for Pete. Frankie, who was new, who was on the community team, wrote a little, today is a sad day. We're saying goodbye to Pete Parsons. And, Pete, what do you think? Well, I'm looking forward to the next stage of my life, blah, blah, blah. So Pete was gone. Pete was not the studio lead for Halo 3. So now we ship Halo 3 in 2007. We were correct that the seriousness of us saying Pete is out got Microsoft's attention, so they understood that we were serious. So negotiations for Bungie's independence got back on track. Suddenly it was, the studio was being co-managed by Harold, Michelle, and myself. And then the negotiations kept going. Michelle ended up leaving. Like I said, talk to Michelle. He'll tell you his side of the story. So it was just me and Harold, Ryan, and myself. running this sort of ragtag, still Microsoft employees, but cutting a deal to, be independent, allow Jason Jones to be on Microsoft's salary while he's working on the next big thing. So Jason started working on the next big thing even while we were working on Halo 3. So that's the beginning of Jason thinking about Destiny. So that's how long ago this is, 2007.
Yeah, that is a long time ago. Does put things into perspective.
I think one of the reasons, and this is me speaking for Jason, which is never a good idea, but I remember thinking that Jason got pretty burned out on Halo 2. It was a very tough slog for the leads. We had to convince Jason that there was a future past Halo if he would just stay with us. That was one of the things he needed. So he didn't work on Halo 3. A lot of people don't remember that. So two people who did not work on Halo 3 were Jason Jones and Pete Parsons. A few months later, I happened to see Pete in the executive office over at Microsoft. He didn't quit Microsoft. He just quit Bungie. I was sort of like, oh, what? Anyway, Pete's no longer part of the picture. Jason was working on the next big thing. We didn't know what it was. It was very mysterious. But when people act like, oh, Marty hasn't been at Bungie in 10 years, he doesn't know anything. And it's sort of like, well, yeah, I don't know that much about the inner workings of Bungie over the last decade, but there's a lot of stuff that happened in the previous couple decades.
You saw enough to not be surprised by what recently happened, right?
Exactly.
Is pretty much the gist of it. So
some people have said, well, how did Pete Parsons come back? And I'll tell you how he came back. Now we've shipped Halo 3. We're going to start working on the next big thing, which was Destiny, while we were fulfilling our obligation to Microsoft so that we would have enough money to go, completely independent. So as we're working, it became obvious that Harold, trying to be CEO of Bungie, had too many people reporting to him. There was too much stuff on his plate. Because I said, Harold, let me take some of the stuff off your plate while we look for somebody to run this. You shouldn't be in charge of PR and marketing. That's too much. You're the CEO. I said, I'll handle PR and marketing. I'm going to do a horrible job at it, but we should open up a position to be head of marketing. So Luke Smith, Frankie, Brian Gerard all reported to me.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that must have been fun.
And we did just a spectacularly good job at marketing. That was during the period where, when we were working on ODST, for those of you who remember this, we had a little bit of a snafu leading up to E3 where we were going to announce ODST to the world. And we had a countdown clock, and we found out like 2 days earlier, before E3, before the countdown clock was done, we found out that Don Matrick had pulled the plug on it. He didn't like the plan. Well, me as marketing director said, screw that.
Marty O'Donnell as the marketing director.
I'm going to keep the countdown clock going. And when the countdown clock hits 0, we're going to say, oh, sorry, everybody, but our overlords have decided that we can't show this thing.
Oh, is that?
So that was a bit of what we call a marketing disaster, and might not have been the smartest thing for me to insist upon, but I was really pissed.
Wow, it's almost like you worked for this company, how much you know about that.
Yeah, it's almost like I was involved in these things.
Yeah.
So within a month or so later, Harold called me into his office, and he was like, yeah, you're a horrible marketing director. And I'm like, yeah, I told you I was a horrible marketing director. So he was going to punish me, and I was like, you're not punishing me, otherwise I quit. So I went through another one of those I quit moments with Harold. So Harold and I started to be like this. It was not great. But there was a point where he came and said, hey, how would you feel about hiring Pete Parsons back as our marketing director? And I was like, oh, man. So would Pete take that wouldn't Pete see this as a demotion? And he goes, no, I've talked to Pete, and, he would love to come back in and do marketing for Bungie. And I'm like, okay, well, let's, run her by the rest of the guys. There was a little hesitancy there. We had to talk about it for a while, but it's like, how bad could it be? He's really good at marketing. He's great at marketing.
Question of the day, how bad could it be?
And I was obviously crap at marketing. So yeah, let's bring Pete back in. And he was head of marketing. So we're talking 2009 or something. That's the first time Pete was fully employed as a sort of C-suite executive level, if you consider head of marketing executive level, one of the leaders of Bungie. That's the first time that had happened at Bungie Inc. So there you go. I'm just telling the facts as you can look up and look at the employment history and say who was where when.
And when did
And
things
that's-
start to change? And, you know, people watching can make up their own minds and, you know, they can be Charlie and point to all the dots and figure it out themselves if they so choose. If they really want to know what's been going on with Bungie, why things are the way that they are, and that this didn't just,
And of course,
happen
I'm not
overnight.
saying right. I'm not saying this is the way they are. I'm just saying this is the facts of what happened when.
Yeah.
This is the personnel changes and how they happened. So, but there was a long period of time where we were all negotiating with Activision. Pete was part of that. We made the decision to go with Activision as publisher. You know, Harold stayed as CEO. I was still audio director, composer, and on the board. And that's when things started to go, in my opinion, where I was thinking this was right and they were thinking this is right.
Yeah.
So we started going down two different paths. That's also when I started seeing certain people that I trusted, creative people, leaving, and didn't make me happy about some things. And a lot of drama happened between us and Activision. You can look all this stuff up. And eventually then I was let go. I was fired and I sued. And by the way, I actually won my lawsuit.
For those that don't know, yeah.
You don't have the right to take my stock away. I worked for that. That's unfair. And the judge said, yeah, that was unfair. You should have your stock.
So I wonder,
glad I
maybe a lesson for anybody else who thinks they were fired without cause, and maybe if their stock hadn't vested yet, you know, come talk to Marty. Come talk to Marty.
Well, you know, I would highly recommend for those up in Seattle to talk to the law firm that represented me. McNall Ebel was a great law firm, and obviously I already have experience dealing with Bungie's law firm, Wilson Sonsini, who I have tons of respect for. Excuse me. In the meantime, I started a company with Jamie Griesmer. Remember Jamie?
Yeah.
I would consider him probably the best designer Bungie ever had.
That's high praise. You guys have had a lot of good designers.
They had some really, really good designers, no doubt about it. I think the talent that's gone through Bungie has been the best talent in the business. That's my experience. Yeah, about a year after I won my lawsuit, surprise, surprise, Harold Rand got fired. So Harold went off and started his own company called Probably Monsters, which, from what I can tell, is doing a lot of good work. There's a lot of former Bungie people working with Harold at Probably Monsters. Look it up. And lo and behold, at that point, so now we're talking maybe 2016?
Yeah,
2017. That's when somehow the new guy to be CEO, president of Bungie, and chairman of the board was Pete Parsons.
Interesting.
So how about that?
Yeah, and then I remember Destiny 2 came out in 2017, and the monetization was like totally fair.
Yeah, Destiny 2, you're right. That was Destiny.
Wait, hold on. What positions does Pete have? I know he's CEO. Is he still? Hold on. Let's back up.
Point. So now we're talking maybe 2016?
Yeah.
2017. That's when somehow the new guy to be CEO, president of Bungie, and chairman of the board was Pete Parsons.
Interesting.
So how about that?
Yeah, and then I remember
He's also the Overlord Minotaur that killed Joe. Oh my God.
Destiny 2 came out in 2017, and the monetization was like totally fair.
Yeah,
and-
Destiny 2, you're right. That was Destiny 2. Because Destiny 1 came out in 2014. I was fired in 2014, just a couple months before it came out. And then I won my lawsuit in 2015. And then Harold was fired the next year. Yeah, so that's when Pete came out, and that's when Destiny 2 came out. You're right.
And the rest is pretty much history, so...
Those details after I was fired, I had no idea what was happening inside of Bungie. But I can assume that things, based on what I am seeing
they
from
picked
the
up
outside,
where they left off, right?
I think so. That's what it feels like.
I suppose, all good things end in time, or at least, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain, yada, yada.
Well, I am not accusing anybody because I would hate to ever sound disparaging.
One thing I did kind of hope to get an answer to was like, what exactly about our previous interview was used against you in the lawsuit?
The continuation of my lawsuit was this accusation that I had retained Bungie property and I wasn't paying attention to what the judge had said, which is you should give back all Bungie property. So because I was sharing at the time, after my lawsuit, and I talked to you, which was a few years after that, I thought I had sort of made peace with people at Bungie. They had given me a bunch of files back that I had, old music files, and then I made some YouTube videos that showed showed, hey, here's how I first thought of this one melody, and like here's some early versions of different melodies and different attempts that I made at composition for all you composers out there. I wasn't trying to make any money on it. I was just, you were encouraging me to like, yeah, make more content for your YouTube channel.
Oh.
And I think you said something like, as long as it's legal, and I said something like, legal schmeagle, who cares?
And that's what they used against you? Oh, come on.
Yeah. I was found in contempt of court for sharing not Music of the Spheres. I didn't share anything that was shipped in the game or prior to the game. It was because I was showing people how my process was composing, and I was using some MIDI files that I had created while I was at Bungie. That was a Bungie work product that I was supposed to give back to them. I thought nobody cared anymore. So I think I said something like, oh, they don't care anymore. The legal stuff's all behind me. Like I'm saying today. I still think all the legal stuff is behind me, but...
Well, I'm sure the Bungie lawyers are going to be watching this again. It's like, come on, man.
No.
Come on, Bungie.
Go ahead. You talk to Wilson Sonsini and ask them if they're going to
What are you doing,
dissect
man?
everything.
Why you got to treat Marty like this, man? Just give your employees their stock. What's the big fucking deal? You guys are worth billions, okay? Marty does not condone a single statement I say in this video. He's actually disgusted by my presence.
I can't believe I'm even talking to you. How did I agree to this?
Yeah, I know. Well, luckily it's all just AI, and it's really good AI, Marty O'Donnell.
Wow.
So yeah, any closing thoughts about Bungie and these layoffs and where the company is and where it might be headed and what last vestiges of their previous identity and culture might still remain?
Well, I owe so much of my career to being able to work with the team at Bungie during my period of time with Bungie, which started in like 96 and ended in 2014. So that's a nice long run, right? That was the peak period of time for my productivity. I got to do so many things, work with so many musicians, work with so many actors, work with so many talented people inside Bungie. I feel like my period of time with Bungie, for me, I consider that Camelot. That was the perfect time. And when you're in Camelot and it's happening, you're sort of not aware of how great it is because there was still a lot of like tension and crunches and arguments with Jamie and arguments with Joe and arguments with Marcus. I mean, we were very much... And Hardy. Yes. Talk to the hand, Hardy. But I've stayed friends with all these guys. And my memory of what a great time that was can never be taken away. In hindsight, I can see some of the seeds of change coming in. And I think the Camelot period ended. And I would say, certainly, I'm not a part of anything post-Camelot. And I leave it up to other people to decide what sort of company Bungie ended up being and it is today.
Yeah.
That's for everybody else to figure out. If you think it's better than it was when I was there, then it's completely up to you to believe that. And I have no problem with people thinking that.
Yeah,
and
that's totally fair.
I got to say that the decision for me to fight for my stock, the decision for me to retain my stock rather than sell it back to Bungie was probably financially the best decision I've ever made.
Financially, the best decision you've ever made was to fight for your stock. Yeah, so,
because Sony came in and purchased all my stock. So I'm like, wow, gosh, thanks, Sony. That's great.
What a good guy, Sony. I also want to say, obviously, it sucks for all the people who got laid off. Hope they bounce back, they can find a job. Hope they're not totally discouraged from...
Damn, dude. I bet that was with them having founder stock, I bet that was a hell of a payout.
Working in the video game industry, I always bring up Satoru Iwata, like taking
because he sacrificed. Yeah, he took a hit. Yep, for the company. Yeah,
self-immolated to keep employees, and I feel like it's really sad and it sucks to continue seeing like the Western side of game development just kind of keep doing the layoffs and we don't need you and you're not important, as opposed to like senior executives.
Yeah, Kelly, just remember, it's just business.
It's just business. It's just a business decision. Well, Marty, I really thank you for coming on again. It's always a blast getting to talk to you. We never have a boring conversation, I don't think.
No, it's great. I love talking to you too, Kelly. And I guess I'll see you in court at some point.
Yeah, hell yeah. Well,
yeah, hell yeah.
We'll get the same law firm because they did pretty good work, it sounds like. Anyways, thanks for coming on, Marty. Greatly appreciate it. And thank you all for watching. If you have any questions for Marty, leave them in the comments down below. Maybe he'll...
Great video, man. Great video. Wonderful interview from the Ackman there. And we'll have links. Mods, please put a link in the channel right now. You guys go check out Ackman. We followed him for years and he puts out wonderful content. With that being said, though, I was actually surprised Tyson wasn't mentioned any at all. And it makes me wonder, like, well, you know, because Tyson's been at Bungie for so long. My question is, it's like, what was his role at all during this process? Was he just too far at the ground level there? All right, that's it.
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.
Thank you.